Welcome to the Golden Flower Podcast, a catalyst for your creative life. I'm Anglea Levesque, a digital artist, meditation teacher, wordsmith, and transformational guide based in Boise, Idaho.
And I'm Gemma Kaufman, and I'm an abstract painter, a creative coach, and also a meditation teacher.
And we are excited to be here today talking about one of the biggest questions of our lives. Who am I? And we're looking at questions of self and identity, the idea of essence over form, and how creativity helps us clarify or discover the vision we have for our lives. We like to start our podcast because it's a podcast about creativity, introducing some sort of poem or excerpt or something that will help us set the stage for the conversation that we're going to have today. Now, I picked a poem called The Invitation by this woman named Oriah Mountain Dreamer. And I want to give a little bit of the background of why she wrote this, because I think it's very relevant to our conversation. At the time, her star was rising and she was going to a lot of these events. And, you have those conversations where it's like, what do you do? Oh, what do you do? And at the same time, she is helping her friend regain her health after having an aneurysm. So her friend had lost her ability to walk and talk. And so she has this juxtaposed to then going out and having these really vapid conversations with people. And she came home one day and she was just like, I'm done. And so she ends up writing this poem. Now, I've read this poem out loud. It's a poem I introduce in a lot of my classes. And every time it chokes me out. So we'll see. It's a little bit long, but I really encourage you to just take a moment and, let the words just kind of hang out in your consciousness. It's called The Invitation. It doesn't interest me what you do for a living. I want to know what you ache for, and if you dare to dream of meeting your heart's longing. It doesn't interest me how old you are. I want to know if you'll risk looking like a fool for love, for your dream, for the adventure of being alive. It doesn't interest me what planets are squaring your moon. I want to know if you've touched the center of your own sorrow, if you've been opened by life's betrayals or have become shriveled and closed for fear of further pain. I want to know if you can sit with pain, mine or your own, without moving to hide it or fade it or fix it. I want to know if you can be with joy, mine or your own, if you can dance with the wildness and let the ecstasy fill you to the tips of your fingers and toes without cautioning us to be careful, to be realistic, to remember the limitations of being human. It doesn't interest me if the story you're telling me is true. I want to know if you can disappoint another to be true to yourself, if you can bear the accusation of betrayal and not betray your own soul, if you can be faithless and therefore trustworthy. I want to know if you can see beauty, even when it's not pretty, every day, and if you can source your own life from its presence. I want to know if you can live with failure, yours and mine, and still stand at the edge of the lake and shout the silver of the full moon, yes. It doesn't interest me to know where you live or how much money you have. I want to know if you can get up after a night of grief and despair, weary and bruised to the bone, and do what needs to be done to feed the children. It doesn't interest me who you know or how you came to be here. I want to know if you'll stand in the center of the fire with me and not shrink back. It doesn't interest me where or what or with whom you have studied. I want to know what sustains you from the inside when all else falls away. I want to know if you can be alone with yourself and if you truly like the company you keep in the empty moments.
I had to have my eyes closed to really allow that one to land. It's a beautiful share.
It's incredibly powerful. And like I said, I think it really speaks what we're talking about today, the question of who am I, and the idea of essence over form, because to me, those types of questions is what gets to, when you talk about essence, it's sort of this nebulous concept, but when you ask those questions, it's really, getting to the heart of the matter, like get beyond all those labels, all of those things that you do in your life, all of those boxes that you tick, all those boxes you fill, and just, will you stand in the center of the fire with me and not shrink back? Like, that's beautiful.
Mm.
Well, when we get
And-
back, we're going to dive deep
yeah.
into this and see where it takes us.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I'm still just letting the words settle in, and the overall feeling is just imagining the level of connection that's available, like at that level, how it just completely does away with that surface level that we all get kind of stuck in or trapped in. And I don't know how you could answer. She's asking, like, it's kind of like there's questions in there, and I don't know how you could really go about finding the answers to any of those propositions without your creative experience, without diving into your inner world and wrestling in the terrain there. I mean, for me personally, um, like if we're talking about who am I and notions of identity and creative identity, I think I probably have more than my fair share of identity meltdown, crisis, whatever what you want to call it. And it was always always reaching for some inspirations towards creative expression that kind of pulled me out of the abyss. Because probably the most recent example of that is like going through the big transition of pregnancy, being on that journey and knowing that I was about to go through this big initiation of loss of, I don't really like saying loss of self, but that things that I identified with were going to be less available. So, having been bumped around like my whole life, finally falling into a groove of really finding the flow for my life through painting and through teaching meditation and going on the pregnancy journey with another group of women who were all first-time mothers. When we joined a group and were led by this wonderful woman. She was basically I was going to say pregnancy coach, but she's really a life coach, incredibly wise woman who can speak on all manner of things, but she specializes in working with first-time mothers. And we would get together in these groups and talk about how scary it is to be on the precipice of the unknown, of not really knowing who we would be on the other side of this big initiation. And I just loved that that's the way we were talking about it, not this kind of like, oh, you're going to be tired for a while and then you're just going to pick up life as it was before. Like, I love the fact that no one in that group ever looked at it that way. We knew that it was going to be a big transformation, to say the least. And that's when that offering of remembering that form, fixed things dissolve. They have a habit of, it's their nature. They form, they build, they become strong for a while, and then at some point they've served their purpose, and then they go into dissolution again. And to remember that forms dissolve, but an essence will remain. So there's always this continuity. And creativity has been a conscious attempt to try and stay with the essence of things, the flow of things, that has the power to kind of pull you through circumstance into that space of unknowingness. And then it's the essence that will whisper in your ear when the time is right and lead you somewhere else.
Well, I think you touched on a couple of really important points. Having those stable anchor points that you can connect to, are so important, because if something happens, right, you have a baby, or you are diagnosed with an illness, or you lose your job, and all of those roles are used to define your sense of self. Then all of a sudden, say you can no longer be a teacher, all of that stuff that has the opportunity to like put you in a total tailspin, because you're like, no, 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 I identified as a teacher and now I'm not a teacher. Well, then who am I? And so if you have those kind of anchors into your essence, and I think that the creative life assists you in that, because no matter what, there's opportunity for expression. And I also think, and this is another important point, that you and I are both meditation teachers, and we understand that thoughts and emotions are not self. But that doesn't mean that we don't have to have a way for us to explore those thoughts and emotions, right? Like, we need to be able to process all of that stuff, especially during really tumultuous times, like transitions of, moving into motherhood, or losing a job, or divorce, or, death of a loved one. So being able to have the tools at our disposal to work through some of those thoughts, no matter if they're dark or happy or sad, or a mix of, motherhood is a mix of a lot of different things. It's not just your joy. There's also this little bit of, the loss of your old life that you still have to work through, and you still have to grieve. And so having the connection to our creative life, to our, the essence of who we are, that creativity allows us to move through some of those things, to move through those emotions and all of that, and gives us an opportunity to surrender to them, so that they can be released, because there's no release without a level of surrender. At least that's my opinion. What do you think on that?
Yeah, I feel like it's when we reach for a creative expression of where we are, or it's like move towards inspiration, something that's calling us, then there's an opportunity for that process to start mirroring back to us what we're really working with when we're going through these difficult transitions, because we kind of do away with the ideas of what we should be doing, how things should be, and all that kind of, and just get into a deeper level of connection with self. I mean, when I was mentioning, like, I used to look at some people and be like, how can you seem so relaxed and easy in your own skin? Are you not having like all this existential chaos going on inside? Some people make it look like being themselves is very easy, and that's never been my experience. I've always had like this instability, and now I know that that is because ideas of identity are inherently unstable. Like you say, it's a relational thing. We draw from roles, we draw from our relationships. All these things are trying to stabilize a sense of self, and they do a good job until for some reason we're
No.
stripped away from these things that gave us that point of reference, and then that deeper question of who am I without these things. And I used to, because of, I don't know, going through so much change and transformation so quickly all the time, I never really felt like I was someone who did cling. I'm never someone who was over identified with my profession. Or for example, but I guess maybe with painting, because it gave me such a lot, and I'd found a way of being. Perhaps that's, I would say, my need to paint. This whole idea, like, who am I if I'm not able to paint? Who am I going to be if I don't have this time to do what I do? Which is, I've found this way, this modality that really works for me. What's going to happen when I don't have that kind of that fear? And
Well,
yeah, I think, yeah,
I
go for
I
it.
would like to pick up on that because I think, especially in the Western world, we tend to look at like identity and self as synonymous, like they're the same thing because we really value like the individual and the first person perspective. And I think that the distinction between the two is where we really dive into that idea of essence over form, right? So self is essence. Identity is is the form that that takes. And that form, like you said, dissolves and then it might reemerge. It might reemerge in a different way. It might totally fall away, and we might, flow into another form. But that essence of self always stays the same. Um, and so having the opportunity to not only, like I said, work through the contents of our consciousness by being able to like express some of our emotions and thoughts through poetry or singing or whatever it is. The thing is that creative pulse within us again might also take different forms. Like say you have an accident and you're not able to paint, but there's still the opportunity for that creative impulse to find expression, to find form again, because it's always there. And so I think that idea of realizing that self and identity are slightly different is an important distinction to make in order to really kind of flesh out that idea of essence versus form. And it's really what we're looking for is connecting to our essence and realizing that it's going to take many forms through our life. And the more that we can kind of ease into the surrender of that, to ease into the release when it's time, I think that that's where we mitigate a lot of the suffering that we might feel when it comes to like identity crisis.
Yeah. As I was listening to you, I was just thinking like how, one of the most scary things that could happen, in the like my early 20s would be someone being like, so who are you? What do you care about? Like, what's your thing? How do you get your kicks? Like, tell me. And I'd be like, this is, what do you want? What are you trying to get out of life? All this kind of thing would be really, really difficult terrain. And again, that's just like people being friendly or curious, or these days it would be a different kind of story. But I can, if that does feel like, especially when we're like, let's say we know that we want to go towards having something more like more creative expression, which is kind of like I want to move towards having more of a creative identity, like be able to relate more to myself as someone who creates in some kind of way. But that can really feel like there's a big gap between, what I do in my everyday life and the ideas about the things that I might want to move towards to start exploring creatively. Um, kind of lost my kind of where I was going with that. Um,
But I know what you mean about this idea. Like, I dislike that question, what do you do? Because
yeah.
I find that very, very difficult to answer. Like, even at the beginning, we introduce ourselves just so people know, like, they have an idea, who are these Gemma and Anglea people? What do they do? And why should I listen to them? But it's very
Mhm.
difficult for me to answer that question because of the way that I see that idea of essence versus form. And I also don't like the way that when you go to a party and you're like, what do you do? And somebody says, oh, I'm a lawyer. Now, depending on what that other person thinks about lawyers, you're put in a lawyer box or you're put in the teacher box or the painter box. And we are these beautiful creative essences that may, embody the teacher, that may embody the lawyer, may embody the painter. But that's such a I don't know, it does our essence a disservice, right? To be able to like, oh, I'm gonna peg you as this or categorize you as that. Uh, and it's like, no, 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 no. That's just one aspect of me, and that's just one aspect of you. And that's what going back to that poem, why it's so amazing is because it's like all of that other stuff, all of that stuff that you identify that could come and go and take form and dissolve, none of that is really what I want to know when I meet you.
Yeah. And then at the same time, it's like there's, you know, before that can be available, you know, you'd have to, in my mind anyway, there's a journey of kind of going inwards. And to me, like, I think if I could put it in a sentence of like discovering who you are through your creative expression is one way to go about um getting closer, because I don't think we ever really know what our essence might be, which again is an ever-changing, flowing part of ourselves. And um it's there's another part of this as well, I feel, which is I feel like we're talking about, you know, how do we tune into essence? And I think that's a good thing to come back to. And I think there's also when we are really not knowing either, it's like we're trusting what the essence is, but we're not knowing it. And we're also kind of disconnected from our ideas of identity, like we're going through a big transition and we know that we are. And there's a kind of letting go, which kind of places us in a place of another wisdom is coming to mind, which is the fertile void, which is willingly being in the not knowing part of I'm letting go of things that have supported me or bolstered my sense of self so that something new can emerge, and to not be in too much of a rush about what that might be. I mean, for example, like the past year or so, I haven't really, like, when my daughter was like only 4 months old, I was kind of pushing myself to kind of keep on track with my art life, to kind of, you know, I'd had an opportunity come up. I wanted to make the most of it. I was still kind of in this a bit of a fear place about can it be both? Because I still had a bit of old programming running that, you know, it's that there was a bit of an either or going on. It's like either do the motherhood thing or do the artist thing. And obviously that's nonsense. So many people, the artist meets mother is very real and wonderful. But it was like old programming in there. So I think there was part of me being like, okay, I'm going to make the effort to kind of keep going with these things I put in place and keep building, whatever that means. And as I was doing it, I was aware that I had to go through this just so that I can really feel what it's like to kind of push in the direction when you know life's not really going in that direction. And it was such a relief kind of to go through that. And then when it turned out that we're going to be leaving the UK anyway, and form just started to dissolve, because then it was just like, okay, now the studio is going to go. I'm going to let go of this sanctuary, this place that I've built up over 7 years, and all of this artist chaos here is going to have to find new homes. So that's going to go. And things are going to go into boxes, and sketchbooks are going into boxes. So I don't have any of this art life stuff around me anymore. And I haven't pushed in any kind of particular way to be like, what's next? What's next? And I've just kind of allowed myself, because I'm familiar with, you know, from Gestalt coaching, like coaching when you think about the wholeness and you work with paradox, that wherever this, if there's fullness, there's also emptiness. To be heard, there is silence. It's just like, I like working with this idea where nothing is happening, everything is happening. One of my paintings, I have that as this kind of like signature thing that it like to speak about. It's called Dream Coming True, and then it just says when nothing is happening, everything is happening, because this kind of push that we're tempted to do, especially when it comes to creative desire, I think it's really that power of knowing when it's time. See, look for the signs. Things are dissolving. Let's let go. Let's go deeply into that space of not knowing. And it wasn't until the end of the summer last year that just a faint whisper was prompting me, because it's like I miss painting, but it's not something that's unworkable. It's just like, yes, I know that's something that I enjoy, and I know that's something that would be good for me, but it wasn't like I've got to keep going, no, I've got loads of things that I'm enjoying here with my daughter and family life and exploring new place and all of that. But around the end of the summer, this whisper, which I recognize, which just like the first tentative shoots of the new, which was knowing that it was time that I wanted to get back in the room where deep conversations were happening. And that's what prompted me to get on board with the group coaching journey, which is where we met. And and now we're here having these conversations with the podcast. And it's like it's that was quite, that's what I call like the nudge. It's like that little voice being like, it's time, because I knew that that would awaken something. It would awaken the essence, which has never really gone anywhere, but it was time through the deep level conversations, which is what we were having on that journey, for the beginnings. And the beginnings can be a long process. I the deeper you go into the not knowing, the more, in my experience, the more interesting and transformative those new beginning shoots are going to be when they do pop through.
Well, I think that that's a great segue. We're going to take a short break here in a moment, but Gemma and I felt it was really important for this this podcast to be a catalyst for each other to stay connected to our, creative self. And we thought it would be fun to, help each other explore different frameworks, different exercises, different challenges to help us stay connected to our creative core. So that's what we're going to talk about when we get back. And we hope that you join the journey with us. And if you feel inclined to stay connected to your creative core, or, figure out what that even looks like or means for you, we invite you to join us when we come back. Okay, so in this last segment here, we really, like I said, we like to give each other challenges. We like to kind of follow the aliveness. Where do these conversations take us? Because both of us are teachers, we've often led people through different exercises that are connected to some of these topics we talk about. So we thought it would be fun to introduce those here. So you have a very fun one that I'm really excited to do. Even like when we talked about it off the podcast, I've already started like in my notebook having ideas of what I'm thinking. So share with us this constellation exercise.
Okay, yes. It's definitely a very exciting catalyst. I'd forgotten that this was the one that when I had my first experience of coaching on a professional development course, this is the one that just got me totally fired up. So I'm very excited that this is doing the same with you. So it's it's so simple. It's just inviting you to reach for 5 sources of inspiration that are calling you now. So that might be a person, for example, an artist of some kind, in all the different art forms. Or it might be a creation, like an actual work of art, be it a painting or a film. So what we're interested in is the qualities of the person that you're being drawn towards, or the work that they're making. And I encourage you to kind of, we touched on this, being in the fertile void, to kind of let go of things that you think, like ideas from the past, things that you kind of know from before, like, oh, I've always been interested in, I don't know, this style of painting, so I'm definitely going to put this person on the list, because that's kind of just going a little bit into the past, where it's quite nice to establish a really blank slate so that you can kind of surprise yourself. I don't know if this has happened already for you, Anglea, that you've found that you're like, oh, I'm going here. So the reason that I say it's nice to have the choice about whether it's a person or an artwork is because sometimes there's a distinction between the maker and the thing that they make. For example, when I did this exercise a while ago, I had the filmmaker David Lynch on there, and the assumption could be, oh, that I love his films, which is not the case. I was more attracted that I really like how he speaks about consciousness. I love how he is carving out this kind of art life of his, doing his paintings, doing his speaking. It was more to do with that. So this is the second part. It's really to drill into, get really, really clear. What is it about this person that is speaking to me? What is it that is calling me towards them? What is the quality? And then when you hear something back, go deeper. Like, what is it about that? And then go again. Like, and what is it about that? So that you're getting into the deeper and deeper layers. And wait till you get to a point where there's a bit of a charge. Like, it's hard to explain what that charge is, Angela. How would you explain that? It's just kind of, there's a point where you just kind of stop. You just know that you don't need to ask yourself any more questions about that. It's kind of showing you something. It's like the light's gone on. Would you say?
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. It's like you get there and you're like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
and you can feel it. There's a resonance in the body. Like you're like, I've hit the bottom of this. And who knows,
Mhm.
maybe in a few years you spiral around and you realize there was something underneath that, but you'll know, like you'll just be able to feel it. It'll feel like a sense of completion almost. Um,
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
yes, that's it. I feel it. I feel it. I'm so glad you clarified though, because as I was making my notes in my book about this exercise, I was thinking, like, what's alive for me right now? That even looks different from, maybe some of the thinkers I was into a year ago.
Yeah.
Like and I was a little like, oh, like Daniel Schmachtenberger. I absolutely love him. He's a brilliant, brilliant human being. And so I had a period in my life for like 2 years where all I was like listening to his stuff. But that was like a year and a half ago. So I was like, he
Mhm.
doesn't belong on here anymore. Like there's new people that have come. And even if it's transient or whatever, but I guess it speaks to that essence over form, right? So the form right now might be like I'm really enjoying Aubrey Marcus. So it might be that and realize if once you do the root digging, like you were saying, like going underneath, 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 you realize there's probably an essence between Aubrey Marcus and the essence of Daniel Schmachtenberger, even though they take two different forms. So that's very
Right.
interesting.
Right. Yeah. You're getting ahead, which is exciting. But you know what just came to mind is when I first did this exercise, I actually got an enormous piece of paper. Like I'm doing this because it was huge. It was, I don't know, A1 or something like this. And I kind of made a symbol representing me in the middle. And then I had the 5 points around the edge. And it just gave me so much space. So I could, when I would write the name of whoever it was, if I think about the one that had David Lynch and it had Patti Smith and Kate Bush, it didn't have many visual artists on it. And it has lots of room for you just to kind of almost just go with association. Like, what do I associate? What is it? And then, you're asking yourself, well, what is it about that? Some people could like to be, they can just ask that question and they get an answer. Some people maybe would like to, just really just allow everything that they've got about that person to come out. And then when you're looking at those descriptors or words or feelings, you'll be like, it's that one. And you can like put a ring around it. What we want to end, sometimes I call this the constellation exercise, but I think maybe it's more like coordinates. What we're looking for here is like coordinates for what is calling us forward from now. And like you say, that can be very different to what it was even 6 months ago. I think all of us would say that the last few years have been very um uh what's the word? There's been a bit of a watershed. I think so many would be like, yeah, I've been through an identity crisis of some kind in the last few years. And this is the perfect exercise to kind of let us get up to speed. And there was the soft version as well that I mentioned, which is, I'm nervous about doing this, and I've never been nervous. I've done this exercise so many times, and I've never had a hesitation because I feel like this will be the first time that I'm really trying to get up to speed with myself in this way, and I know how powerful it is, and I just can't even tell you one at this point that I know for sure is going to be on that, and that for me is very unusual. So I'll be feeding back about that. And if the softer version is, even when you were looking at things kind of scrolling through Instagram, there'll be things that will stand out to you. And instead of it being like a bit of an unconscious, I like that. When there's something that really catches you, like an artist or a story, drill into it in the same way we've just been describing, like, what is it about this story or the way this is being communicated or this artwork? Something about it is caught me, and just do it like that. So it's not overthinking. This doesn't say anything about like who you are. It's a bit of a kind of like, this is more, this is about inspiration in the now. And as you say, this can really, really change. And that should be freeing. And there should be a sense of like, I can go somewhere with this. This is my opportunity to kind of surprise myself with what that drill down shows me, that quality, because there'll be an extension that we can get into next week, which, as you were just touching on, look at the interconnectedness of these things. But we don't want to think about that now. It's just that innocence of like, I'm going to go with this.
All right. And we will always make sure that for all of these challenges, exercises, whatever, we'll give it a hashtag. So if you're listening to this podcast, a year from now, and you're like, I did a constellation exercise, I really enjoyed it, and you want to see how ours turned out, and you want to share with us how yours turned out, we'll be able to connect that way through searchable hashtags. So let's wrap this up. Again, if you want to connect with us on Instagram, it's at the Golden Flower Pod. We also have a YouTube channel at the Golden Flower, and we'll be posting all of our episodes as well as our creations and challenges and those sorts of things, so you can stay connected with us to your creative core. Well, follow what's alive, whatever that looks like for you, and we will
nurture that spark.
Yeah, nurture that spark, and we'll be back next week.
Thank you.